Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, geeks and nerds and ambassadors everywhere, and welcome back to the Ambassador Wing. And hope y'all are having a wonderful Thursday, Friday evening. Sorry, I'm used to streaming on Thursdays. It's Friday. And tonight we are back. We are live here on the Ambassador Wing where we discuss cinema, modern, retro, and ultra retro, where we talk streaming, where we talk retro television. If it's geeky, if it's nerdy, if it's fun, if it's popular, if it's obscure, and if you're a cinema geek, if you're a retro TV enthusiast like yours truly, this is the place to be tonight. And tonight, we are back with part 2 of Andor, a full series breakdown. And tonight, we're going to be discussing episodes 7 through 12. And I just realized I did a little doofus. So hang on one second. I gotta fix something here. There. And save. And bingo. All right. Now. And tonight, as I said, we are talking all things Andor, episodes 7 through 12. And I love this show. I love this freaking show. You know, I will level with all of you, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Twitter, whether you catch this live, whether you catch this on the replay, whether you're here with me, because I have dropped the link in the chat. So if y'all want to pop in and talk and join the discussion, the link's over there in the chat, pinned. Use it. I was excited for this series. I literally, honestly, was not obvious. I was optimistically hesitant, or I was hesitantly optimistic. I was hoping this series would be good. This is one of the best damn pieces of Star Wars content we have gotten in a while. Now, that's not to dismiss the other shows that we have gotten. Kenobi, I enjoyed. Book of Boba Fett, of course, The Mandalorian, Season 7 of the Clone Wars, all those shows, minus the Bad Batch, but that's another discussion for another time. Actually, that's a discussion we've already had. This is, as far as I'm concerned, peak Star Wars. This is a good series. Hang on, I gotta make one more fix to the ticker. Bear with me for just 1 second. There we go. Save and done. All right, there we go. Everything's copacetic. But this series, this show by Tony Gilroy, he nailed it. He nailed it just as much as when he did Rogue One. Now, obviously, this is a prequel of a prequel. And tonight, we're going to be talking about everything from episode 7 to episode 12. Because a few weeks ago, I did my review of episodes 1 through 6. This is going to be going through the Narcana 5 story arc, and of course the finale. And of course, got a longtime friend, you know him, you love him, here live with me tonight, man of many talents, many jack of all trades, and master of many, Zach Leary. Zach, old man, how you doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Cannot complain. So, Andor, episodes 7 through 12. Your thoughts? What'd you think?
Really good. Yeah, the whole thing was really good.
Like I said at the start, I did not know what to expect from this series. I did not know what to expect from the show. I know we were getting a prequel to Rogue One. They were focusing on a character that a lot of people were like, really? This guy, Andor? Couldn't have picked somebody else? I'm like,
Yep.
but when we were last time, he got sent off to prison. An Imperial factory prison, forced labor, and one of the scariest damn prisons I have ever seen. I mean, a prison built where you can quite literally electrocute the population at the flip of a switch. I don't know what diabolical mind from the Empire came up with that idea, but geez, how brutal can you possibly be? I mean, that prison. Hmm.
Well, so I'm going to touch on something you just mentioned, which is that a lot of people were not really all that into the concept when we heard about it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Cassian Andor show. It's like, why don't we do a Darth Vader show, Lords of the Sith uh, show or something? Or I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. It just was. This show was always an underdog show, and the fact
It
that
was.
Gilroy proved it and proved his concept, and in a lot of ways, kind of backed up the movie he made too, is really really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have. There is not a lightsaber in sight. There's no force. There's no Darth Vader. There's no nothing. This is a show. It is a political intrigue slash a heist show set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And it works.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
freaking works.
Well, another thing I really like about the show is that for a show named Andor, the show is really an ensemble piece. I mean,
It is. Mhm.
something that they were able to pull off that I think is so impressive is giving minor and recurring characters great scenes and giving these character actors just a great opportunity just to nail some just awesome monologues throughout the show. It's like there's so
Yeah.
many little characters who get amazing moments. And what that does is builds out the world of Andor in a way that I think is hasn't really been done to that extent.
Not in a long time. I mean, the strength of this show, honestly, is the performances and the writing. It really is. It is that is the strength of this show. I mean, you've got a great cast of actors and actresses. I mean, you've got Genevieve O'Reilly as Mon Mothma, who we saw in some deleted scenes and I think one or two scenes in Revenge of the Sith. Obviously, she had her appearance in Rogue One. But aside from that, she's playing a legacy character that we only saw once
Mm-hmm.
in Return of the Jedi. That was it.
And she was
That
awesome in this.
was she is. She is absolutely she is. She is the I'm trying to think of what is the best way to describe Mon Mothma. She's the idealist who quite literally is on her own, even in her own household. I mean, her daughter wants nothing to do with her. We find out that actually her marriage to her husband, Perrin, is an arranged marriage because it goes back to an uh, old Chandrilan custom where they had arranged marriages. Didn't know that existed in Star Wars. I mean, hello. Far as we knew,
Mm-hmm.
people just married in the normal old-fashioned way. So, and her interactions with her friend Tay Kolma, great scenes. I mean, absolutely. I mean, this second set of episodes, 7 through 12, tells a great story. It tells about just how ruthless the Empire is when they're backed into a corner. And after the Aldani heist, we see what happens after just one act when 80 million or 80 billion credits are stolen by a small group of rebels. The Empire goes into complete lockdown mode. And, the crazy thing is, Luthen, Stellan Skarsgård's character, he's like, when he's talking to Mon in his shop, he's like, this is what we want them to do. We want them to become more oppressive. And she's like, you crazy people are going to suffer. He's like, yes, I'm aware people are going to suffer. And that's what we need.
Yeah, well, she's an important piece of the puzzle. I mean, and she's able to operate in, kind of the upper class circles and try and draw support from there. So you've got her doing that. You've got Luthen doing his thing in the shadows. You've got Saw kind of consolidating power. So the whole
Yeah.
thing is pretty cool, man. It's like a show about espionage. Um,
Yeah.
and so you talked about the cast a little bit. I mean, even the
Mm-hmm.
minor characters get such a great chance to shine, like
Mm-hmm.
that Scottish guy, the fat guy who's working underneath the crazy ISB guy. That's a great character too. The ISB guy, what's his name?
Which one? Because several.
The dude who is stalking the head chick.
Oh, Cyril Karn. Is that who you're talking
Great
about?
character, yeah, awesome character.
Yeah.
To the extent where I thought he would be the main villain at first, and you kind of see the downfall of him, and he's kind of recovering from just the failure, the
Mm-hmm.
stench of failure. Um, Yeah, man, a lot of great stuff in these last episodes. You got to see Andy Serkis get another shot at doing a Star Wars character,
Yes.
and he was just amazing. Um, you know, I can't believe how talented Andy Serkis is. I mean, people unfortunately peg him as a mocap actor, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's just great no matter what. I mean, he's great put him in as a voice actor, put him in as a mocap, but on screen, the guy's great, man. He's been around forever, and they made the right
He,
choice. His character was fucking awesome.
yeah, Kino Loy. I love when they get Cassian and the rest of his group and everything that he's with, the other prisoners, and they bring him to Narcana 5. They bring him to the prison. And you see that one Imperial officer, that one really sinister looking one. And he's like, here's why we wear boots and you all don't. And then they demonstrate the defense mechanism. And you're like, holy shit. This is diabolical as hell. I mean, this is like, how much of a hand did Palpatine have in the creation of this prison? Because it's like a giant force lightning generator, essentially, except you don't see the lightning. It just zaps everybody and incapacitates them. And if they let it run long enough, it can kill them. I
Yeah, well,
mean,
that whole episode, those episodes are awesome because you could break those down on a smaller scale and show how authoritarianism recruits citizens through fear. And like Andy
mm-hmm,
Serkis's character is a great example of a guy who is doing the bidding of the people who have, in a way, enslaved him.
yeah. I mean, he is there to serve his time. But when he finally figures out, when they find out that the prisoners are just being cycled right back through, that nobody actually is getting out, Kino's just like, okay, here's what I know. What are we gonna do with this information? And the whole setup and everything, you see it through those 3 episodes where Cassian goes into that bathroom and is working on just a little bit at a time, a few minutes at a time, filing down, weakening that plumbing tube or that plumbing pipe. And when we get to the 3rd episode and everything, I think it's episode 7, 8. Yeah, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, 11, 12. It's episode 9 where they break out of the prison, and you see Cassian finally. You're rooting for Cassian. I'm like, come on, break this damn pipe so y'all can get out of here. And okay, I will say this. I love the fact that when they get to the command center of that particular prison, and you see this skinny, scrawny little Imperial officer speaking into the microphone that goes throughout the entire PA system of the base, and it's got a voice modulator on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Andy Serkis' character, I'm like, okay. I couldn't help but chuckle about it because I was like, this is a little bit of a callback to when he was playing Snoke. But at the same time, obviously, he's not playing Snoke. And there were actually, I don't know if you saw this online or not, Zach, but there were actually people trying to connect Kino Loy to Snoke. And I'm like, they're two different characters. Just because the same guy is playing him doesn't mean they're related at all.
Well, Snoke was such a disappointment. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm sure somebody came up with this back in the day, but I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm picturing J.J. Abrams like, how do we connect Snoke to Palpatine? Oh, he's a clone made from force-sensitive DNA. He's a strand cast. Why not just make him Palpatine's apprentice? You fucking idiot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but
A little bit.
that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Kino Loy Snoke. Get
Yeah,
out of here.
no. Now, I will say this much. The conclusion where the prisoners are all getting out of the prison and Cassian pauses for a minute. He's like, "What's wrong?" And you hear him say it. I can't swim. And if Cassian had been able to stay on there, he's like, okay, well, fine. A couple of us will drag you out of here. We'll keep you afloat and everything. We'll drag you to shore or whatever, or we'll take turns when we get tired. We don't know what happened to Kino, and it just absolutely breaks your heart. Because he seemed like a decent guy. He really did. He seemed like a decent guy, and he doesn't get out. Not all the way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he was a decent guy, but his circumstances forced him to break his own ethics. So he's a complicated guy for sure. Because despite him being a good guy and being there against his own free will,
Mm-hmm.
he was intimidating. Like he was a scary guy. Like in terms of him
Yes.
running his section, like he was a
Mm-hmm.
scary pit boss.
He was. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, Keno Lloyd, the first time we meet him, you were like, yeah, this is a guy I don't think I want to tangle with. He may be short, he may be a little old, but I think he can mess you up if he really wants to. And, you know, Cassian keeps working on him. And there's that one episode where Cassian keeps saying, "Nobody's listening. No, they don't care what we say or what we do." And Kino's been there for so long; he's been so indoctrinated into the way of thinking. Like he's so paranoid that he's worried about saying a word out of line against the Empire, against um the staff there in the prison. It's almost like a mental prison that he's stuck in, really. And, you really see how a prison like that, an imperial prison like that, can break a person. Because you have that one older guy that ends up dying because he can't handle the work anymore. It's too stressful for him. And when the doctor finally divulges that they killed over 100 prisoners on one level because they found out that somebody was brought back in that was supposed to get released. And at the end of that particular episode, when when Cassian says to him, "How many guards on every level?" And he said, "No more than 12." And you're like, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
he's in now.
Well, yeah, well, it's that whole prison was and see, it's a different kind of evil. I mean, we've seen the creepy
Mm-hmm.
Palpatine Sith evil, which is awesome, but this is
Mm-hmm.
really even kind of creepier because this is the procedural evil of
Mm-hmm.
society taking place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's creepy, man. Those episodes are creepy. The whole thing is creepy. You look at, like you said, how it psychologically breaks people, physically breaks people. Yeah, it's really good. And you mentioned the paranoia of it. That's a theme that kind of runs through the entire show. You see Saw becoming paranoid, and you can kind of see how he became who he was in Rogue One,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the last time we see him, where he thinks like he's questioning Luthen, like, hey, you know, what exactly are you? And he thinks there's somebody within his outfit who works for Luthen.
Yeah. Well, and um, Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera. Of course, I mean he delivered a great performance in Rogue One, and he came right back in. He stepped back into that character, and he has not missed a beat. I mean, we even see, there's a couple of conversations between him and and Luthen saying, "Look, you go in and you help this other guy. The Imperials are gonna know that we have a leak inside the ISB, and they're going to shut everything down." And so I was like, "But we can't sacrifice all these men." And Luthen's like, "Yes, we can. We can sacrifice these men because this guy, this Anton Krieger, he's a loose cannon. So he's like, I'm willing to sacrifice him for the good of the entire movement, for the good of the entire rebellion." He's like, there are others that can take up or pick up the slack where we lose Krieger. And we see in episode 12, we don't see what exactly happens, but we find out anything through a scene there in the ISB headquarters that Anton Krieger does go attack the power station at Spellhouse, and his entire group gets wiped out. And it's, you feel just a smidgen of sadness, but at the same time, Luthen knows what he is doing. Luthen absolutely knows what he is doing in terms of the organization he's trying to build up. So, and I do want to say hello to the chat. Tim's talk. Tim, it is always good to see you, bud. Appreciate you stopping in this evening. So,
Yo,
but go ahead, Zach.
no, go ahead. I was just saying hi to Tim. What's up, Tim?
Oh, okay. Let me ask you the dynamic between Luthen and Saw. What did you think of it, honestly?
Yeah, it follows the theme of paranoia. These are two guys who don't really trust each other, but have to work together.
Mm-hmm. When I first learned that Stellan Skarsgård was going to be a part of this series, I had no idea how much I was going to love his character. I like Dave as Andor. He's great in this and great in that part. But Stellan Skarsgård's got a special place in my heart as an actor. I mean, ever since I saw him for the very first time in Hunt for Red October as that very cocky and smarmy Soviet captain. And I've watched his career throughout the years. I mean, obviously, I loved him as the scientist in the Thor films from the MCU, and to see him, and obviously Baron Vladimir Harkonnen from Dune, the new one by Denis Villeneuve, but to see him in a role like this it's really a treat. I mean, he has the look and the appearance of someone who can intimidate you, and he has the look and appearance of someone that can work you psychologically. And of course, a couple weeks ago, we had, I think, one of the best pieces of writing, one of the best scenes in a very long time in terms of Star Wars content in a while. And I want to play that clip. And I don't care if I get a copyright claim. I don't care if I get a strike. I don't care, because I love this scene. I love this monologue by Skarsgård as Luthen. So bear with me for just a moment. I've already got it queued up. I just gotta pull it up. So bear with me for just a minute. Okay, is it up? It is. All right, let's.
Is that guy Krieger?
No, that's Lonnie, one of the ISB mole, if you remember.
Yeah.
That's who. That's who. This is the episode where the guy. This is the guy. Lonnie goes to Luthen and says, "Look, I want out," and he's like, "But I want to get into this because I want to really break down this monologue and this scene and this episode in general." So here we go.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm. Kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost. And by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. The ego that started this fight will never have the light of gratitude. What do I sacrifice? Everything! Just stay with me, Lonnie. I need all the heroes I can get.
One of the best damn pieces of dialogue I have heard in years, and that's saying something.
Yeah, I mean,
and from a Star Wars show, no less.
Yeah, his character is really a intimidating character. I mean, that every time he's on screen, it's gold, man. I mean, like even him escaping the tractor beam was one of the. I mean, what made that scene so interesting is that he wasn't attacking them, right? So, you know, you could expect maybe fire some rockets. No, it's a tactical move. So that's one of the few skirmishes I think we've seen where there wasn't outright, you know, a battle.
No, and it was very brief, and you really get to see the capability of his ship. And I love that freaking ship of his. I do. I love that ship. It's sleek. It's packed to the gills with weapons and little secrets and everything, little secret toys that he uses, and he uses. I actually watched a couple of videos or anything regarding how he disabled the tractor beam. Here's a fun fact about the design of that ship. That was actually an early concept design for the Star Destroyer for Star Wars originally, but they didn't use it. But they brought that design out of mothballs and used it for the show, and it was a great idea. You know, seeing Luthen working those Imperial officers on the bridge of that ship and seeing him taking on that ship and getting away. I mean, they crank up the tractor beam emitters as high as it can possibly go, and then he just releases those that clutter and everything from his countermeasure. That's the word I wanted to use. That tractor beam countermeasure, and disables it and blasts their squadron of fighters, and poof, he's gone just like that. And the Imperials are just standing there holding the bag like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah, well, the line that popped into my head was regarding that the officer was, you just met the fucking devil. You know, you just had a run in with the devil. You didn't know it. That's a scary motherfucker, man. You know, have you heard the rumor that he could be a Jedi? How do you feel about that?
You know, I don't know how I feel about it, honestly. I'm kind of on the fence because this show is so good sans force users. It really is. But if it turned out to be he wasn't necessarily like a proper Jedi, but he was force sensitive, like high level force sensitive to where he could manipulate the force to a degree or whatever, okay, cool. I can deal with that. But just as a very dangerous man, I mean, just the name Luthen Riel, that is the name of an intimidating individual. This is a guy you don't want to cross. And we see in these last 6 episodes, well, 5 episodes, just how dangerous Luthen Rail can be. And it isn't just in him shooting a blaster, it's his mind and it's his ability to articulate himself, just like that monologue that I just showed. You know, you get the impression that he may have had connections to the Jedi. We just don't know how much. Because he's like, I wrote an equation 15 years ago to which there's only one answer. I'm damned for what I do.
Yeah,
And
he's the fucking Star Wars Batman.
in a way, yeah. I mean, he has seen. You get the idea that he may have even fought during the Clone Wars. I mean, he's seemingly old enough. He would have been old enough to fight during the Clone Wars. We don't know to what degree or what faction he was on, whether he was with the Republic or whether he was with the Separatists. We don't know for sure. And that's another interesting fact. The fact when him and Saw Gerrera are talking, and Saw is talking about the fact that they're working with Separatist holdouts, and Luthen's like, I don't care. These people, we need these people. We need the numbers. We need the bodies. We need the tech that they bring to bear for this fight. He says it. I use the weapons of my enemy to fight them. He hates that fact. He hates it, but he has no choice.
Yeah, well,
He
Saw is right to be concerned about him, man. I mean, he is such a scary guy. I mean, he would. It sounds like he would kill his own mother to further his ambitions here. And by the way, we don't know yet how Saw got blown up. When we see him in Rogue One, he's missing a leg. He's got all sorts of
actually both legs. He's
both
missing
legs.
both his legs. Yeah, he's missing both his legs.
Somebody's going to blow him up. It could be Luthen. Who knows?
It
if
could
Saw
be.
loses his value to him and becomes too paranoid, who knows what could happen?
Well, and it's interesting. We see the first time we meet Saw Gerrera is in the Clone Wars animated series. We see him again in Rebels, if I remember correctly, and then we see him in Bad Batch, and it's really in Bad Batch where we start to see the cybernetic conversion of his body and everything, where he's wearing the it's almost like a mobile iron lung that he's wearing around his chest and everything, around his torso. I don't know if this was necessarily your thing, but you actually meet Saw Gerrera in Jedi Fallen Order.
Yep,
as
I
well.
remember.
Okay.
Yeah, that game's awesome, man. Of course.
Okay, I didn't know if you had played it or whatever, so I didn't know if that was your sort of thing or not.
Up until recently, I was of the mindset that was the best thing Disney had done in terms of a Star Wars storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's solid all the way through. That's a great game.
It is. And I cannot wait for Jedi Survivor. That looks like it's going to be really interesting, too. They're supposed to be releasing a new trailer or some more information in the next month or so, I think. But, Saw quite literally cannibalizes his own body, it seems like, or sacrifices his own body for the cause. And that just shows you how fanatical he has become, just how much he is driven to bring down the Empire. And when him and Luthen are talking in one of their scenes together, and Luthen says, "Call it for the greater good. Call it whatever you want," and that's when they decide to they decide to sacrifice Anton Krieger. And Saw
But we
says,
never see, by the way, I put a picture in the private chat if you want to pull them
"Yeah,
up.
yeah. We see a holographic image of Anton Krieger once, and I heard a
It's a
funny
cool
story.
name, right? That's a
It
badass
is.
sounding name.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Hang on one sec. I'll bring it up here. Just bear with me. Let's see. Screen share. Somebody said once they finally gave all the fat, overweight Star Wars cosplay ass.
There we
I
go.
could not help but laugh at that. I
And let's
could
be
not
real. I mean,
help but laugh at that.
this guy had
Eh,
the actor who played Anton
mhm.
Krieger had the Anto Krieger. I thought it was Anto Krieger. Had the cushiest job in the history of
It
Star
might have been.
Wars.
Yeah, he didn't have to do a thing. He just had to stand there, be scanned for for a holographic
He
image, and
looks
that was it.
cool. I mean, let's be real. He looks
He
pretty
does.
badass.
Yeah, he does. I mean, just for a holographic image, yeah, he does. Um, but I don't want to pass over like the main guy in all of this, of course, Cassian, because this whole series is centered around him and his journey as to becoming a part of the Rebel Alliance, becoming an agent. And you see his resourcefulness, particularly in Narcana 5 arc and everything when he's in the prison. And you see, as I mentioned, you see him working on um that piece of piping in the wall of the latrine just off of the floor. And you see just how, you see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how am I going to get out of here and how am I going to get as many of these guys out of here as I can. And interesting fact, I don't know if you caught this or not, Zach. We actually meet Melshi, another character from Rogue One, while Cassian's in the prison.
Oh,
And
okay.
It's actually him and Melshi that escape together, and we see them running across that beach or whatever it is at the end of the episode. And then we see him again on Namos. That was the place where Cassian got arrested.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah. Well, him as a main character he's a grittier protagonist than I think we've ever had. The fact that he is willing to kill people is a kind of a divergence from previous protagonists. He's scrappy, he's gritty. There's a heart to him, and his heart really seems to revolve around his mother. And just
Marva.
yeah, and her character improves him just by her being in the show like that. We understand their connection to each other when she cries in the first episode. So he's kind of a unique character. I thought it was pretty good, him as a lead.
Well, Diego Luna is I think a very underrated actor. I don't know what other projects he's been in throughout his career or anything, but I will say this. I liked him as Andor in Rogue One. But the question was, would he be able to carry his own show? I have to say, I think this first season of Andor has proven yes, Diego Luna as an actor can carry his own series. I hope he gets more work off of this. I mean, because honestly, the thing that drives me crazy about this is such a high quality show. It really is. And yet the conversation, I mean, you've had people nitpicking. There aren't supposed to be bricks and screws in Star Wars. Well, how the hell do you think things get built and how things are held together? The Force?
People really said
I'm
that.
one particular YouTuber. Yes, he did.
Okay,
I'll put it in
that's a
the private
little
chat.
okay.
I'll put it in the private chat.
All right, yeah, that's taken it. I think a step too far. I mean, my first mode as a audience member is um, indifference. Right, I'm not sitting there with a notepad trying to pick out small details that don't jive with me. I'm trying to give whatever it is a chance. Now, does that like so predisposition to the material? You have that, I think. You
Mm.
know, some, but I went into this show with a totally blank slate. I mean, like I said, I wasn't interested in the concept really, and I
Mm-hmm.
went into Boba Fett kind of the same way, and so Boba Fett ended up disappointing me. This I liked. I just went into it
Yeah.
with an open mind. I mean, but to oh, okay, is that who it was? But that's such a dumb detail to
Mm-hmm.
talk about. How does he know that? You know, that's stupid, man.
Yeah, honestly. Now, in terms of the conversation around Andor, it's taken place a lot more so on Twitter than it has, it seems like, any place else. And by and large, what I've seen in terms of the conversation about Andor on Twitter has been, mm, by and large, positive. People have really enjoyed this show there, and they're like, why are more people not watching this? And I have a feeling a lot more people are watching it. They're just not talking about it. And I don't know if it's just because they just want to sit back and enjoy it. And you know what? If that's the case, okay, cool. I mean, I'm not doing this stream tonight, and I didn't do the stream I did a couple of weeks ago just because I'm expected to do it. I have been a Star Wars geek since I was a kid. I have been a Star Wars fan since I was a kid. And this to me is just more Star Wars. And to me, it's good Star Wars. I'd have to say it's some of the best Star Wars content that I have had the opportunity to watch in a while. I mean, this is almost like a complete palate cleanser to the mess that was the sequel trilogy. And if they can continue to bring this level of quality storytelling and writing and directing, and the one thing that I really want to touch on tonight and everything is the fact that the volume is not used. These are all practical sets, and these are great looking sets. I mean, the ISB headquarters, the prison on Narcana 5, um, Ferrix, uh, Mon Mothma's home there on Coruscant, Luthen's shop. These are great looking sets. And it takes a lot of time and effort to build stuff like this. And when they did some of the behind the scenes promotional stuff for Andor before it released, and you saw Diego Luna walking through some of the sets, and he's like, we built all this. There's very little CGI that's going to be going into this. I mean, obviously there was CGI, but I love the
Right.
fact we get practical sets and practical effects for this show. And it is really going back. This is almost, I'd say, this is the homage to the original Star Wars that the original series deserves. And the fact that it does touch upon that era of the Star Wars universe. It's the lead up to the original trilogy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I like that. I mean, when it's done like that and it's not squandered, like you've got the Last Jedi, which did mostly that, and it was just like lost potential. But they utilized their full potential here, and
Mm-hmm.
I love that, man. I love that retro aspect. If I ever did a big sci-fi movie,
Mm-hmm.
I would want to use uh, kind of what they did with Empire Strikes Back and do model ships and matte
Mm-hmm.
paintings, and Why not? I think audiences would kind of relate to it. So I'm all for practical, man. That's always an A+ in my book. And I wanted to say real quick that
Mhm.
thinking of the future of this franchise, I've always said that they've got
Mhm.
to kind of go their own path and come up with new factions and new wars and new battles and new characters.
Mhm.
But if they're not going to do that, I will settle for now with a change in tone. And this show is a total change in tone. It's its own unique
Yes.
experience.
It is gritty. It is somewhat grim. And I think considering the time period in which this show takes place in terms of the Star Wars universe, it is very appropriate. I mean, everybody is under the thumb of the Empire. Everybody is under the thumb of the Emperor. You've got the ISB breathing down everybody's throat, and it. But there is those moments where you're like, okay, this is where everything started to turn. This is where everything started to change. This is where the people were really starting to stand up and say, no, we are not going to sit back and just let our freedom be taken away from us by a tyrant. And it was disorganized, it was jumbled, it was all over the place. But people were making a concerted effort to try and bring the Empire down. And little by little, they started to gain momentum. But you're right. I don't say this necessarily as a negative, but I almost don't want to go back to the Mandalorian because I think Andor has kind of spoiled me. But at the same time, I will go back to the Mandalorian because I want to see that story continued. I want to see how it's going to end. And from the a couple of trailers that we've gotten thus far for season 3 of The Mandalorian, it seems like that third season is going to be a lot more grittier, a lot like potentially like Andor. The question is, will the obviously it's two different stories from two different periods in the Star Wars universe, but you're dealing with a more grounded and a more gritty character in the person of the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. And it's almost a shame that we have to wait 2 years for season 2 of Andor, but I will say this. For the last 3 months, give or take, we have eaten very well off of this show because this has been an absolute treat. You know, one of the relationships I love in this show, and it's actually heartbreaking because of what happens to this character, but the relationship between Marva and Cassian. When Cassian comes back to Ferrix to take Marva out of there, and she's like, "I can't leave. I'm not going to leave."
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "I'm not going to let them run me off." And you even see that little droid, B2MO or just B. He's like, I never thought I would feel for a droid as much as I felt for B, except for maybe K2SO. But that little droid and everything really
What about
tugs
poor
at your
little
hearts.
R2?
R2 has his moments too. He does, but B B has a personality all his own. He really does. I mean, he's like a more empathetic R2D2. I mean, he's not exactly an astromech droid, he's more of an industrial type droid, but I grew a soft spot for B. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, he's like their
And
dog.
yeah, he's like a mechanized pet.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's not
we
doing
can jump
anything
ahead
for
a
them.
little
He's
bit.
just hanging out. Like when we see him, he's not like the butler. He's just hanging out. You know.
Yeah. But he does have a part to play in the finale in episode 12. And when he rolls up and he activates his holo projector, and you see that holo projection of Marva giving that speech, and then you see him get hurt or damaged, and they actually take the time to drag him off, to get him out of there, to get him out of the line of fire and get him off of the planet. Even you're like, okay, the little guy's gonna make it.
Yeah,
I
well,
absolutely,
yeah.
love the fact. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I love the fact that you empathize with a droid. I mean, except for R2 and C3PO, and and K2SO from Rogue One. I've never really empathized with a droid from Star Wars per se. But with B2MO, I did. When he was sad, and you're like, okay, in the episode where we find out that Marva has died, and they use the reflection of the rain on the window, and it's reflecting off of the optical lens that's B's eye. There, I've heard some analysis on that particular part saying that was supposed to be a kind of a optical illusion to show that B was sad, that B was crying, even though B doesn't have tear ducts and he literally can't cry. But he would feel the loss of Marva. And it's, you know, the fact that a show like this can make you feel for a droid when you've got so many other great characters and everything in the show is really a testament to the writing and to the voice acting for, I don't know who did the voice for B, but they did a wonderful job. They really did. I mean, you talked about all the mentioned some of the smaller or side characters. B's one of those smaller side characters, and he's really endearing.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Well, another title for the show could be The Rise of the Rebellion. I mean, when I'm watching this, it's like I'm seeing founding fathers of like the Washingtons and the Jeffersons,
Mm-hmm.
and Andor's mom became one of them. You've got
She
Saw,
was.
you've got
Mm-hmm.
all these.
You've
These are
got
like
Luth.
the power players. You wouldn't have a rebellion without some of these people. Mon Mothma, maybe you would have,
Mm-hmm.
but not the one that eventually defeated the Empire. Maybe something would have came along. I'm sure it would have, but these are
Mm-hmm.
like the founders of the rebellion. These are like the Jeffersons and the George Washingtons.
The John Hancock's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, his mom, dude, became like it. She had an impact at the end.
she did. That speech she gave. She's like, Ferrex has been asleep for too long. She's like, they came and leave, and then they would come again, and they would leave, and we just kind of let them go, come back and forth. But now they're here, and they're here to stay. And she's like, it's time we stand up to these bastards, and we push them back. And when in the final episode, in episode 12, when you see that one random townsperson, that young kid, or not young kid, but like teenager or 20 something, and you see him soldering together the circuitry, and you're like, okay, what are you building? And then you see him putting more of it together, and then you finally realize, oh shit, he's building a bomb.
Yep. Yep.
You're like, he's.
Well, let me throw this out there
I
too.
mean,
What makes this a Star Wars show is
mhm.
the undercurrent of being optimistic about the future. Despite it being a dark and gritty show, I like dark and gritty, but this for me hits the sweet spot where there's still hope and there's still an undercurrent of positivity. Like we are moving towards a freedom, right? Despite all the
Mhm.
dark shit in the show, which I love,
Yeah.
I also love
Mhm.
having that little sliver of hope.
I do as well, because it's right there in Luthen's speech and everything that we watched just a few minutes ago. I burned my life for a sunrise I will never see. he knows that he will not survive this, but what he does will have an impact going forward. And that is, I would imagine even the founding fathers of the American Revolution realized some of us may not all of us may make it out of this. We may end up dead. If we lose, we may end up hanged, or they would have been hung.
Right.
And the same is true. And one of the most absolutely gut-wrenching parts of this second arc and everything is when Deidre Miro goes to Ferrix and starts tracking down all of Cassian's associates, and she finds Bix, the young woman. And what was the name of the doctor? Dr. Gastro, something like that. Brings in that headset and they strap her into the chair, hands and feet, and then put on that audio device. That I think you got it right. I think you got it right on that
Don't
one.
say that.
Zach.
No, that's a joke.
Oh, okay. Anyway, but and they tell her what exactly that she's going to be listening to, and it's the death of an entire species of people on, or a species of aliens on a planet. Seriously, you're evil. Anyway,
Saved you from it though.
You're awful. Anyway, you see the toll that torture takes on Bix. It has quietly broken her in a lot of ways. And she's just a shell of herself. She's just sitting there in her room. She's not moving. She's not doing anything. She's just been absolutely psychologically broken by what she had to listen to.
She was giving off drug addict energy. Like, do you think she was like self-medicating?
Considering what she had been exposed to, maybe. Really, maybe. I don't know.
No.
But, when Cassian comes in episode 12, and I'm going to say this. As hard as Miro and the Imperials tried to catch Cassian, he went a complete solid snake on their asses in episode 12. Didn't even get near him. He took out 2 or 3 Imperial guards in that hotel and everything where they were holding Bix, and he was out there like a ghost. He completely ghosted their asses, and they didn't even catch him. They killed a bunch of people on Ferrix, and a bunch of Imperials got killed, and their headquarters got damaged, but they didn't even lay a finger on him. And then he shows up on.
It reminds me of another founding of America reference, which is never fight somebody on their home turf. I mean, that guy knows that town in and out. If you were going to go there and try and get him in his home turf, where he knows the tunnels and the whole thing, you better bring a fucking Star Destroyer or 2 with you.
And it just shows just how resourceful Cassian is. And you're right. You never fight somebody on their home turf. And that's the one thing the Empire, and I think even the Rebellion, to talk about the Clone Wars just for a minute or anything in reference to this into the final episode. A lot of times the Republic, the Grand Army of the Republic would go to somebody else's backyard, and you really see this in the the Umbara arc and everything in with that one corrupted Jedi general, Pong Krell. They were completely the Republic was completely and utterly buggered by the Umbarans. It's like you just said, you don't fight people on their own turf. You get them off their home turf, and you get them in a situation where you have the upper hand. Miro and the Imperials, they had all these plans laid out. They had all this stuff, all these contingencies in place. And it was a funeral procession and people that were just fed up with being pushed around by the Imperials, and they're like, screw you all. And the one guy that led the procession of the funeral procession that was holding Marva's brick, you could say Marva posthumously kicks some Imperial ass all on her own.
Well, do you think? Okay, so yeah. The reason the British lost to the Americans is because the Americans knew the territory, and the Americans really had a far, less trained army. They had insufficient numbers, and that's how they won. They knew the terrain. But I was going to ask you, I mean, do you think that the Emperor is aware of Andor?
I doubt it. Palpatine wouldn't be even remotely bothered with something as insignificant as one.
You got a
I already
bot
got
in
them.
the chat.
They're already muted. They're done.
But I was going to say, I mean, okay, so
I already
let's
got
say
their asses.
let's say you and I are trying to catch Andor, and we are, the head of the ISB. I mean, what is the proper route to get this guy? I would send Inquisitors after him.
That might be a touch of overkill, but at the same time, maybe. I mean, here's the thing. You want to... Okay, and some people have pointed this out, and I can't say I disagree with it. Although, at the same time, I can't understand why. How did the ISB not realize that Andor was on an Imperial prison, factory prison? How did they not pick up on that? But then you have to think about it. It's the bureaucracy of the Empire itself. I mean, they've got quite literally hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions, of
it's bloated
prisoners. It's bloated to all hell. So he would quite literally just sneak under the radar. I mean, even though Miro has got this broader latitude thanks to Colonel Pontegratz, she still is not going to be able to pick up on absolutely everything that's going on in the bureaucracy, and in particular for the prison system of the Empire. They didn't know that Andor was part of the Aldhani heist. They didn't know that he got away with a few people from said heist. They did not know who was a part of that crew for the Aldhani heist. They just knew that they got robbed.
Yeah,
and that
well,
they
you
potentially
don't want them to know who you are, man. That's
No.
Saw Gerrera's problem. That might be Andor's greatest asset, that nobody knows who he is, because he can just, slip through the cracks.
Well, he
because
like I said, he completely
even the ISB commanders don't know him. It's only the grunt people. It's like that guy who was almost fired and let go is like, this guy's a real fucking problem. Nobody's listening to him.
Yeah. Cyril Karn is, I think, the only person who has actually seen Cassian, who has I think he has a holographic file of him, and that's it. But Miro didn't want to listen to him. And at this point, Cyril's working for a bureaucratic organization within the gears of the Empire. They're not going to listen to him. He's a nobody.
Well,
but I guarantee you now
that he stole in that first encounter. Like, what was that little holographic thing that he was trying to give Stellan Skarsgård?
Luthen?
Yeah. I keep wanting to say Lucian.
It's Luthen, but I get you. It's some sort of a piece of Imperial navigational equipment. I can't remember the exact name of it offhand,
Okay,
but you know
but that guy
that's essentially
realizes
what it
that
was.
that guy realizes that Andor is a legitimate threat. Like this guy is not just some grunt soldier guy. He was meeting with some unnamed leadership guy, which is Lucian, and
Luthen.
it's like they should listen to this guy, but it's like you said. I mean, the upper echelons are unaware of Andor's activities and his talent and his role.
Yeah, because well, it's like Cassian said earlier on in the first 6 episodes. I think it's Luthen that asked him, "How'd you get in?" And Cassian's like, "You really think they're going to look at a guy like me?" He's like, "You just walk in there and act like you belong there." And because they're so fat and satisfied, I'm quoting Cassian at this point. They don't the Imperials don't realize how easy it is for someone that has the infiltration skills of a Cassian Andor, who learned from Marva and Clem, the people that rescued him, who worked as scavengers and scrappers and whatever else and everything they had done before, as they just before they rescued Cassian. He learned everything that they knew, and obviously they were good at what they did. I mean, these were people that knew how to get in and out of places. So Cassian learned from two very skilled thieves. That's essentially what Cassian is. But he's taken his skills as a thief and a scavenger, a scrounger, and everything else, and he's elevated to the point where he can infiltrate just about anywhere and look like he belongs. And that's when you know you've got a high class or a high level thief and everything, and a very useful asset for the rebellion.
Well, so let's touch on another interesting aspect. I mean, how do you feel
Mhm.
about the relationship between Karn and Miro? It's a
I
weird one.
think yes. Well, here's the thing. He doesn't. I don't think he necessarily has any type of sexual or romantic um inclinations toward Deidre Miro. I think it's more the fact that he recognizes her as someone that can help him get what he wants, and that's to get his hands on Cassian Andor and repay him for what he did. And I think because,
Which is get him fired, basically.
yeah, essentially it got his organization that ran the security on that planet, and now he's working, like I said, for a bureaucracy within the Empire, and he hates it because not only that, he's having to live with his mother. And I will say
Yeah,
this,
that's rough, huh?
especially at his age.
And she is like a little bit too much. I mean, she's like driving the nail in further.
Yeah, she really is. But you know what? I will say this: the actress who plays Cyril Karn's mother, great actress. I mean, she does to play someone so annoying, and yet at the same time, she's annoying, yes, but she's also right on some levels about what she's saying to Cyril, because this is a guy that, if he just listened to his boss instead of going over his boss's head, everything would have stayed just fine. Instead, he's like, "No, we have to avenge the deaths of our comrades." I'm like, dude, you all work security on a backwater industrial planet. You're not that big of a deal.
Well,
I
that
you know
guy
I could
was
have
unfit for command. Like his speech was terrible. I mean, you remember that?
yes. I do. I do remember that speech at least to a point because it's been a while since I watched
Oh, it
the.
was embarrassing. Like nobody clapped for him. That guy's not a leader, but he thinks
Not,
he is. He's ambitious,
yeah.
but he lacks all the skills of leadership.
Yeah, he's a wannabe. And he's not even an effective wannabe. And, the crazy thing is, Cassian even goes him too on Ferrix in episode 12. Now, he saves Miro from getting killed and everything by the mob there and on everything during that whole, during that riot. But aside from that, he doesn't do much else because he fails in helping capture Cassian.
Yeah, and
Like I
she
said,
fucked up too. I mean, what was she doing there personally? I mean, that was her mistake. She was too overconfident.
she is. I mean, here's the thing. The Up until episode 12, I was kind of rooting for Deidre Miros. I'm like, this is an Imperial. I'm not supposed to like you,
Oh,
but
I
I
wasn't
like a
rooting for
lot.
her at all. Yeah, well,
Well,
see, another disturbing factor is you see how high strung the Imperial officers are in the underling. It's
yeah.
creepy, man. I don't like that. I've seen that kind of shit in real life, and it's always creeped me out. Somebody who is that high strung, it's like, come on, man. Yeah, so
No, I
that's
get.
creepy. Seeing the ambition of the underlings within the ISB, which is not even really. I mean, compared to the Imperial Navy, it's nothing. It's nothing. So I don't know, man. She has always kind of creeped me out just with her
Well,
demeanor. She's so high strung.
she's high strung, but she seems to be able to manage it, and that for me is the thing. There are some people who can be high strung and not keep it together. She's high strung, but she can keep it together. Not to mention, she's got a very good analytical mind, and that's the one thing I respect about her most. Now, was she overconfident in the fact that she's like, well, we've got superior numbers, we got superior firepower, we've got death troopers and everything across the board? Yeah, sure, you've got all that, but sometimes it's simply the will to want to be free that can drive people to overcome the seemingly impossible. That's the interesting thing. I mean, we see what happens to that squad of death troopers in Rogue One. All it took was one or two Guardians of the Wills, Baze Malbus, taking out a good chunk of them all by his onesie lonesome. But he did
That
it.
guy was badass.
He
Yeah, I wonder
was.
if we'll see him, man.
I've honestly thought about that. I've wondered if they're going to have, I would not mind. I wouldn't mind a cameo by Chirrut and Baze and everything if Cassian goes to Jeddah pre the Empire going in and starts strip mining Jeddah for all its kyber crystals. But here's the other interesting thing. Everybody was wondering, would we get any type of post credit scene for Andor? We got one.
Oh, I didn't see it.
You didn't?
Can we watch it?
Yeah, it's really short. I mean, it's not even particularly long. It actually ties into the Narcana 5. I hope I'm saying that. I know I'm
Did,
saying
did
the name of the planet right.
Okay. Did you see Black Adam?
Narcana. No,
I got
I
up
did
and
not.
walked out. There was
But I
an
did.
important post credit scene there too. So I'm not a post credit guy. I'll catch it on
Uh,
YouTube. You know.
um, honestly, I was not really all that enthused to watch Black Adam, and from what I've heard, it was kind of meh. So, okay, hang on one second. I've got YouTube pulled up. Just it
They
takes a
had me
minute,
till the end. I'll just say
obviously.
that.
Let's see here. Andor. There it is. Andor post credit scene. Perfect. Thank you very much. Just gotta give it a minute. I don't want it explained. I just want the scene itself. There we go. Okay. All right, hang on just a minute, bud. Let's see if I can't. Okay, theater mode. Nope. Stop. Back her up. Okay, hang on. All right, 1 second, my friend. Yeah, would you like me to see the post-credit scene for Black Adam?
Nah. I mean, I was just giving an example. I don't watch them, man. I usually don't. It's like you got to sit through 5 minutes.
It's okay. Is it? I just want to make sure it's. There we go. Okay. Just takes a minute. All right. Bring us down here. All right. You remember those pieces they were building on the prison, the Imperial prison?
Yeah.
This is where
yeah,
those parts come into play.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. Interesting. Um, so I mean, okay, that's weird. That's like the guy who built the gun that got shot with it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so now the death. So that looked like an almost finished Death Star too. By the way.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the infrastructure, the build that might have just been the shell. They may not have built the innards as of yet, because we know that Andor takes place 5 years before Rogue One. So,
Okay,
and they're
so
saying that potential.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I was hoping for some cameos, man. I was looking forward to, and they had this rumor that Palpatine would show up. You know, and as
Yeah, but
much
here's
as
the
that
thing:
would
that was
throw
just
things, as much as that would throw things off, I mean, I am a fan of Palpatine. I'll take Palpatine in every upcoming show. I don't care. So I was kind of hoping that we would get him when they said you're missing it, and I think this was maybe the last episode of the one before that. I thought it was Palpatine giving a speech or something, and they show up, and I think it was the attack on Krieger.
yeah, yeah. That was it. That was what they were talking about, and everything was Krieger's
Did
attack on.
Palpatine pop into your mind when they said that? Were you like, oh, here we go?
No, not really, because it didn't fit the narrative. Here's the thing: would it be cool to see Palpatine? Yeah, of course it would be. But was I expecting to see him? No. The only time I would have expected to see him would have been something in regard to a scene with Mon Mothma. But here's the thing: at this point, Palpatine has pretty much given control of the Senate over to Sly Moore and Mace Masamita, and he's just kind of hanging out in the shadows, hanging out in the Imperial Palace or wherever he's at there on Coruscant or any of the other worlds that he has headquarters on or a palace on. So the day-to-day running he's left to the Moffs and all of the underlings and so on, the bureaucracy of the Empire itself. He doesn't take an active role in the day-to-day running of the Empire and everything. He's Emperor, yeah. He's the big guy. He's the guy at the top of the food chain. But as far as him actually, dealing with the minutia of running the Empire, he don't care. He got what he wanted. He got the Jedi are destroyed. The Empire's running. He's ruling a galaxy. He's got everything that he wants and then some. And
Well, yeah. Well, so the opportunity that I think they have for Palpatine, maybe in season two, is
maybe.
the version that we saw in Rebels, where he was digitally brought back to his Chancellor Palpatine look when he was talking to
Mm-hmm.
Ezra, and to show that
Yeah.
version, because I had read that the galaxy at large was unaware of what he told Coruscant in terms of his disfigurement, and that it was kind of a
Um.
rumor that he was disfigured, but
Mhm.
most people didn't buy into it because you would see him appear as, this friendly old man. So they could do that. I think that might be cool. See Chancellor Palpatine again.
Maybe. I wouldn't be. I would not be antithetical or completely opposed to it and everything, but I don't want a cameo just for cameo's sake. And honestly, that's the one thing I've really appreciated about Andor is it didn't have a bunch of cameos from characters we had seen before, and like more prominent characters. I mean, let's be honest, Mon Mothma is probably the most well-known character in the entire show, and that's because of her appearance in Return of the Jedi, Rogue One, and so on.
Well, you could call those
And
cameos. You know, it's like we've never seen her
yeah,
character fleshed out.
no, and we've never really even heard much about Chandrilan culture up until this point. I mean, the architecture of her home there on Coruscant, the the wardrobing and so on is very. It has a very pronounced far eastern vibe to it. Um, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, either live or in private or not, but her best friend Tay, his wardrobing was actually based on concept art by Ralph McQuarrie for Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that's a new world as
Yeah.
well, man. Is like the socialite realm of Star Wars was kind of interesting to take a look
Yeah.
at.
Well, it's also interesting the fact that the crooked banker um that is wanting an introduction for his son to Lita on Mothma and Parent Mothma's daughter in exchange for him getting her access to her funds and so on. That to me and is a really interesting turn. I'm not going to lie, and I just wonder
I don't
how
fucking
that's going to
trust that
turn
guy,
out in
man.
season two.
I don't trust that guy at all.
I can't say I entirely blame you because he does seem obviously he's a very shady individual, but as the old saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures, and Mothma Mon realizes if the rebellion is going to grow and survive and so on, it's going to need funding, and she has the funding. So now let me ask you, and also in
Sure.
episode 12, there's a conversation between Mon and her husband, Perrin. And she's talking about the fact that he's a gambler. And she actually asks their chauffeur, who's actually an ISB agent, to shut off the intercom so he can't listen on their conversation, but he still turns it on. Do you think she knows? Do you think Mon knows that she was being listened to by the ISB?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No
Do you think
doubt. I
she's
mean,
trying to
she's throwing the
go ahead?
scent off of her. Like if that's the kind of dirt they report back, that all looks according to the image she's putting out there. It's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I if I heard that kind of, oh, she's got personal drama. Okay, That's exactly what I want to hear. If I hear some creepy shit like, oh, she's got these connections, well, then maybe I'm concerned. So that all is fitting right into her disguise. And I think that's a purposeful move. That is fits right into the whole thing.
It will be interesting to see how that plays out in season 2, because I think she's trying to get rid of baggage, because she realizes that she's eventually going to have to go underground to really take up leadership for the rebellion. All her and Bail Organa and some, and I think she's going to marry off her daughter, and I think she's going to get rid of Perrin by having him arrested for gambling debts or something like that, or having even potentially have him taken out completely. The question is by who?
Yeah, well, we might see Bale again. I mean, Jimmy Smits is around. I think he's still interested in doing his character.
Yeah. Well,
I
remember, he
think
was.
another opportunity for season 2 is the Senate being dissolved. I think we could see that too. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we might see that. I mean, well, although
The time frame is a little bit off, but I could picture that happening within the Andor show at some point.
there could be discussion about it, but we don't hear about it being formally dissolved until episode 4.
Right.
During that conference room scene and everything with Tarkin and the rest of the Moffs and Admiral Yularen and Vader, and so on.
Well, it's just it's
So-
it's a cool concept that we saw happen off screen. I could see them utilizing that in some way. Who knows? I mean, who knows? I mean, I like the idea of
Like I
seeing
s-
the behind the scenes of that happening. Maybe it doesn't
Mhm.
fit this show, but I think it's a cool concept.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's the one thing that this show has really done is it has really fleshed out the world of the politicians and the rebellion and even the bureaucracy and especially the ISB of the Empire. That's the one thing I've really loved about this show is the world building that has taken place in it. And it's been a real treat to just see how intricately everything fits together. Okay, will do. But honestly, that's all right. This is getting on my nerves.
What?
Oh, this damn bot in my chat.
Is he still there?
Yeah, I think it's a
these
different
guys
one.
too. I get him too. It's probably the same guy, just different name.
I'm happily married, you douchebag. Screw off. You see this? It's called ring. I don't need your skanks. So take a flying leap off
Well,
the
here's
nearest
the
cliff.
thing: is there's no skanks really available. That is just like an internet ploy to give bank account information. No, I get them too. I think everybody gets them. I mean, the real thing is like, why are these people allowed to have
Mhm.
accounts?
They shouldn't be, but they are, unfortunately.
That's hilarious.
But
I mean, that's the first
then
time
again,
I've seen one on a
who
live
cares?
show. See, I'll tell you when we get off the air. I'll tell you how to get
they
rid of these
pop up
people.
everywhere.
There's a way you can prevent them from even
Oh,
coming
I
on.
have a good idea, but yeah.
Anyway, that totally derailed us.
I'll take the advice.
That derailed the whole fucking thing. So
Not really.
So
No.
the behind the scenes
Nah,
of the Empire
not
though
really.
is interesting to me. I mean, that's just one example of like the type
Yes.
of territory they could explore. The dismantling of the power of the Senate is interesting because we already saw a weakened version of the Senate where these senators were afraid to take any kind of stand against the Empire with Mon Mothma's kind of modest proposal. And you saw everybody just kind of leaving her by herself. Like you
Up and
saw half
leave.
the Senate. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and the other thing was too that news of the heist on Donnie was coming out too, and everybody was writing off like, well, this is more important than listening to her ramble on. So that was the
Well,
other big thing.
well, it's funny because you see her being treated kind of like an extremist, like she's crazy. You know, like she's some crazy left-leaning. It reminded me of real life in some ways.
Yeah, to a degree, I would agree with you absolutely. Because at this point, that Senate is nothing more than window dressing. I think everybody realizes where the real power is, and that's with the emperor and the bureaucracy of the empire itself. The Senate has very little real control or say anymore as it is, and it's obviously once the Death Star is completed, Vader, the Emperor's like, "Screw you all, you're done. No more Senate. The people no
Well,
longer have a voice."
yeah. Well, it's I love the video essays that dive deep into some of this stuff and relate it to real life. One of the things you could draw
Mhm.
from this is how easy it is for personal corruption. I mean, you just have to have empathy with these people like the senators who left. Well, I mean, if you're offered, a $5 million contribution, maybe you're.
Mhm.
I mean, think of it as a regular guy, you would be inclined to take that money and abandon your morality. So, in a lot of ways, I mean, that is kind of a look into that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the one thing that um, Diego Luna discussed on some of the other people, Tony Gilroy and so on, when they were doing interviews for Andor, that they discussed was this show wasn't just, it was obviously, yes, it was expanding the story's universe, but it was also showing in a fictional context how a political system can become utterly corrupted. And
Yes, yes,
we could also talk about the idea and talk about the idea of what a revolution or a revolutionary group really looks like. And it's
yeah.
not everybody going to be on the same page, but kind of leaning towards the same goal.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
it's based in realism. You've got a
yeah.
show based in realism. But before I came on here earlier today, a few hours ago, I watched for the first time actually a Clear and Present Danger, and that is a movie that
Ooh.
has legitimate political
Okay.
things you can
Great
draw on,
movie.
where you've got a president who is
Mhm.
undercutting his own guys, doesn't care if they get killed down in Colombia. So to me, that takes a story and makes it real when you have these real life things you can look at. So I wanted to say this too, and I forgot to mention this when you were talking about Diego as a lead. What
Mhm.
impressed me about him, when I like something, I go and listen to interviews and see what these people are all about. Diego
Mhm.
has such a strong connection to the material. I mean, he did not want to do another
Yeah.
cookie cutter type of show. He wanted to do something interesting and impactful.
Yes. Well, Diego Luna is, as I mentioned, I think he's a very underrated actor. And as I said, I hope that this show gives him more opportunities to do what he does best, and that's act and entertain and work on projects that he cares about. I mean, you can really tell. I mean, the guy was an executive producer or is an executive producer on Andor. That's how much this means to him. That's how much this character means to him. That's how much this period in the story's universe means to him. You almost, I would wonder if maybe he had family from where he came from that they themselves fought in some sort of revolution. And I'm tempted to go do some research on that because
there's a familial connection. Yeah, it's like with Guillermo del Toro, another one of my favorite Spanish storytellers.
Yes, same here.
You know, every time he does a show, this is true, and you can find the videos and the pictures. Anytime he releases something, there's a celebration in his hometown in Mexico, and he'll always fly back and hang out with everybody. So there is a familial element to some of these guys, and I, like you say, I would not be surprised if there was that same connection and passion with Diego.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I've really appreciated with this cast, while it seems like everybody's off in their own little corners, this seems like a very tight knit cast. You know, you've got the Imperial faction, you've got the Rebel faction, you've got Cassian and his group, you've got Luthen that's kind of off on his own, but you get the impression, and I don't know if there's any truth to this or not, this is just an assertion of my own, that this is a cast that really enjoys each other's company and really enjoys not just spending time on the set, but perhaps spending time off set with each other. I mean, this is a very, I will say, and I don't use this word often, but in this context, it's appropriate. This is a very diverse cast of actors and actresses that have together to do this show. And, you know, that's the one thing about Rogue One that I appreciate, that you had this rebellion that was made up of different people from different backgrounds. Ethnicity doesn't matter to me as much. I mean, obviously, I recognize ethnicity when I see it, but it's the backgrounds of these people who are in these roles. I mean, you've got an actor like Forrest Whitaker who's playing this very.
Oh my God, his character was better in this than in the film.
Well, the thing is, you've gotten more time with him. We have what, 1 or 2 scenes with Saw Gerrera in Rogue One.
Is better. The writing is better. The first time we see him, it was so fucking impressive. That little monologue he has is so good. I mean, they give these actors a chance to showcase their talent. So I wanted to mention one other guy here, and there's so many of them. I mean, I was so impressed with the casting director. I actually looked up who she is. Some lady named, and this was like days ago, Maria Gold. She has worked on over 200 film and television projects. That's experience. That's talent. The fact that she was able to put all these people together, like Alex Ferns, the guy who plays Linus. Who would have ever thought of him? You know, I've never seen this guy. He was phenomenal. But the guy I want to talk about is Partagaz.
Oh yes, Colonel Partagaz.
Can we get a picture of him? Let's put up a picture while we talk about him. This guy is phenomenal.
I'll look him up. Let me just look up the cast for Andor. It'll be the quickest way. Andor cast. Okay. Show all. If you want to show it, there she is. Where are you, bud? Where are you? Alex Ferns, Sergeant Linus. Yeah.
Pull up Anton Lesser, Major Partagaz.
I'm looking for him.
And let's get a picture of his character. That picture of him, I got the cast here too, is an old picture.
Oh, I got him. He looks different. Okay, hang on 1 second. Found him. There we go. Man, he looks younger on his IMDb.
He does, huh?
Than he'd show. That's you know. But I will say this, you know.
Anton Lesser, man, another underrated guy. This has been his breakthrough moment. Is the past couple of years. What I know this guy from is Game of Thrones. This guy plays such an awesome character.
Yeah, it's Qyburn.
Yeah, he is fucking awesome in Game of Thrones, and all of a sudden, man, he's getting work. He pops up in Star Wars. He's in one of the trending shows on Netflix right now, 1899, about the ghost ships,
Mm-hmm.
which is a pretty fucking cool show too. So this guy, I mean, is finally getting the recognition at the age of 70, is finally being given the opportunities that he deserves.
Yeah. Well, and he's, that's the one thing that I think is kind of a carryover from when Lucas was in charge. He always went to the old school actors, particularly the British actors, for the Imperial officers and some of the other characters and everything. And you know, it's a real treat to see actors like this to get their due. And in a universe like Star Wars, you really have an opportunity to play these really dynamic and almost larger than life characters. There's one scene in particular when Miro kind of outdoes one of the other officers in the ISB, and when Partagaz dismisses everybody and he says, "Deirdre, walk with me." And it's a very short conversation. It's it's 2 lines of dialogue, and that's it, or 3 lines of dialogue. And Partagaz says to her, "Well done, and watch your back."
Yeah. Well, I talked about the high strung kind of image that most of these guys
Mhm.
paint. Anton Lesser paints a picture of self assurance. And that is something that it is kind of differentiates his character within the ISB. Is we're looking at a guy who is confident about himself.
Yes, absolutely.
Same
Well,
with
there's another character that makes who
same with his Game of Thrones character.
who
Yeah, that Qyburn in
oh
Game of Thrones.
Gilbern
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Qyburn. Okay. There is a cameo appearance by a character that we first see in episode 4, but played by a different actor. That's Wolf Yularen, and he's the one who gives the speech right after the heist on Aldani, and he's like, "Here's everything that the Empire's going to be doing going forward. Here's how everything is going to be cracking down." And different actor, because obviously the original actor who played Wolf Yularen has long since passed. But a lot of people were like, it's good to see this character because he was the head of the ISB. He was the overarching guy. And Wolf Yularen goes all the way back to as an officer during the Clone Wars for the Republic.
Yeah, well,
The same
what
actor
precedes
who did the voice.
him is that
Mm-hmm.
that sound, dun-dun-dun-dun, from the Clone Wars, danger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that guy's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. He has a great presence and everything as a voice actor.
So who did they hire to
So
play him in real life? It's not the
this
same guy.
because, like I said, it was a different actor. I think the actor who did the voice of Wolf Yularen is still alive, but actor who played Wolf Yularen. Give me a minute because I gotta look.
Scroll down. You can go to
Let's
IMDb
see.
and find him, I'm sure. Actually, I can let me look it up for you.
Yeah, because I really want to know the name of the actor because I can't remember it off the top of my head. Okay,
Malcolm Sinclair.
Oh, is that his name? Okay.
Yep, Malcolm Sinclair.
There's the name so that commands some respect.
But so here's another thing.
I just want
One of the reasons Anton Lesser got the job, it just so happens that the casting director of Andor was a former Game of Thrones casting director.
Sure. Okay. Oh, didn't mean to have that up. Okay, hang on. Remove. Zach, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. It sounded like you cut out for a second there.
I might be cutting
You're
out a
saying
little
something about the
bit.
casting. Okay,
Okay,
you were saying something
you can
about
hear
the
me now?
casting director. Yeah, I can hear you now.
So the
So
casting director for
you were saying
Andor,
something about the casting.
yeah, yeah. So the casting director for Andor
Mm-hmm.
was previously a Game of Thrones casting director. So of course, talent recognizes talent. That's how Anton Lesser got the
Hmm.
job. She had worked with him before, hired him before for
Oh,
Game of
okay.
Thrones.
Okay, I get what you're saying now. Okay, yeah. Well, that's if you and that's kind of what I've been saying with this cast. It really feels like it's not just a cast of actors and actresses. It feels more like a community and everything. And that's I think what Tony Gilroy and the casting director were able to do was Gilroy put together his list and gave it to what was the name of the casting director again? It slipped my mind.
Maria Gold.
Maria Gold. And she's like, "Here's my cast list. Do what you can to get it." And she's like, "Okay, let's see who I already know and I've worked with." Obviously, she knew she knew Lesser,
Yeah,
and
yeah. Well, it's also a knowledge of character actors, and she has
yeah,
that totally. She's been a
yeah,
part of 200 film and TV projects. She's been there, done that. She
yeah.
knows who's right for the job, man. It's impressive.
And that's not something that can be taught. It's something that's
Right.
well, maybe it can be something, but it's also that's gained through experience.
But it's also
And
inherent. Like you and I have talked
yeah,
about character actors forever on Top Shelf
mm-hmm,
TV over here.
mm-hmm,
We understand it because we're fans of cinema. Some
yeah,
casting directors don't have that. Some of them are corporate. This we're
yeah,
talking about a person who understands talent.
yeah. And a lot, like I said, a lot of the conversations that I've seen on social media and so on, and some of the other reviews that I've watched in terms of Andor, people have pointed that out. The talent comes through the screen, and people, whether they are Star Wars fans or whether they are just fans of good television, good streaming series, they recognize it. It's something that's inborn. I mean, the blow up after Luthen's monologue in that one episode was incredible. I mean, a a a monologue that was like little over a minute and a half long, and people were just eating it up. And I think it's because people have been kind of starved for quality dialogue for a long time. It's something that is very powerfully delivered, incredibly well written, and just it gives. I think deep down within all of us, we all have, to one degree or another, have that kind of idealism inside of ourselves as well. We just don't know how to express it.
Yeah, well, there's another factor involved as well. Is
Mm-hmm.
human beings can appreciate human excellence, and Stellan
Yes.
Skarsgård is a representation of excellence in acting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why do people watch sports? Because there's something to watching somebody take
Mm-hmm.
that lane and really excel. So it's like, you and I talked about this and on our Top Shelf TV video, um, which hopefully will be out tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, you cannot
Okay.
lose when you hire somebody like Stellan or somebody like Forrest Whitaker. You just can't lose. You cannot lose. And
No.
you talk about the writing, which is good. It is good, but the most important factor is casting. If you cast a lesser actor to do that monologue, it would not be as impressive.
Mm-hmm.
When I was watching the Book of Boba Fett,
Nope.
I felt like I was watching a one-man show. I felt bad for him. We're watching Tamara Morrison carry the whole fucking show by himself. you didn't have the kind of supporting characters or supporting actors to back him up. And to me, that's what makes this show so awesome. You talk about the sense of community. That is because you've hired the right actors, you've given them opportunities to flesh out their characters, even with very little screen time. With Boba Fett and even Obi-Wan to a certain extent, I felt like I was watching a one-man operation.
Mhm.
But in this, what makes it feel vast is the fact that you've got all these awesome characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that is the one thing I think a lot of people have been looking for, is a show that, while you do have a central focus, and that is of course Cassian Andor, but it's the people around him that makes the universe interesting, and makes the world interesting, that makes the story interesting, and gives him interesting people to play off of. If you look at the crew from the Aldani heist, every single one of those characters had an interesting aspect to them, or several different aspects to them. If you look at the Narcana prison and all the people that Cassian was
Yeah,
interacting with there, and then you transition to Luthen and who he's interacting with. He's dealing with senators, and he's dealing with revolutionaries, i.e., Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera, and even his assistant there in his shop on Coruscant. And it has been, we just recently wrapped up our review of the whole Babylon 5 universe, that being Babylon 5 itself, and then the spin-off series Crusade. That was a show that was extremely well written, and actually and also very well acted. And that's why it's a show that has stood the test of time, because people realize, as you said, excellence.
yes,
And
yeah.
I think you really you drilled down onto something that we have missed as people who want good storytelling. Excellence.
Well,
And
I'll give you another example, and then I'll ask you a
sure.
question. So,
Okay.
in terms of Andor, in my mind, we had about 15 amazing supporting characters, about 10 or 15 amazing supporting characters. Even the redhead guy with the mustache
Mhm.
was an awesome kind of little supporting character. His family, and he's trying to get out, and Luthen is not
Mhm.
letting him leave. Just everywhere you look, you have amazing supporting characters. I think to Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, I think has a lot of
Mhm.
great supporting characters. But I look to these other two, and I see maybe 4 or 5
Mhm.
great supporting characters
Yeah.
compared to 10 or 15
Yeah.
for Andor.
Mhm. I agree wholeheartedly. So, what's your question?
Babylon 5 or the next generation?
Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Yep.
You mean?
Uh-huh.
Oh boy. Mm. Honestly, Babylon 5.
Really? Okay.
But let me give you a short explanation as to why.
Sure.
Babylon 5 explores 2 or 3 dynamics that I have always been extremely interested in. The first being, what does religious belief look like in the future? Is it a place of tolerance, or is it a place of restriction? And Babylon 5 is a place of tolerance and communication between different cultures and even different species. The second, the idea of the universe being far older and far more mysterious and expansive than we ever could possibly conceive.
Well, I think
Being
that last part
populated
is a
by
fact. That's a fact. Yeah.
yeah. But just let me finish
Yeah.
that point.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's all right. You're fine, bud. Populated by beings of immense power, but also potentially as relatable as you or I to each other. And the third point, the exercise of power. People who have great power and those who have little, and what they do with it. Those are the three dynamics in Babylon 5 that I think honestly set it above Star Trek Next Generation. Although I do thoroughly enjoy Star Trek The Next Generation, I love all 7 seasons. Has a great cast of characters, but I will say the one character that has always stood out to me, and I hate the fact that they killed this character off in Picard, and that is, of course, the character of Q, played by John Delancey.
Oh, well,
When I found out,
Picard. Oh, God. Picard was a nightmare.
yeah, I know, yeah, but when I found out that they killed off Q in season 2 of Picard, it ripped my heart out because of all the characters, especially the reoccurring characters that they had introduced in Star Trek The Next Generation. Q was about the only one. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some other reoccurring characters like Loxana Troy. I loved Loxana Troy in that show. I did, played by Gene Roddenberry's real life Majel Barrett Roddenberry. I loved her. She was quirky. She was funny at times. She was very serious. She was very heartfelt and sincere. I loved her, but Q was something we had never seen before. He was a being that could do absolutely anything he could put his mind to, and yet he decided to try and understand what it means to be human. And he could be funny. He could be at times malevolent. At times he could be cruel. But there was always something. You knew you were in for something special when it was a Q episode. And the fact that they bookend the entire series with Encounter at Farpoint and I can't remember the name of the series finale, but the fact that they bookend the entire series with Q, I love that. I absolutely positively love that. But for me, it will. The answer is Babylon 5.
I'm going to have to watch it because I watched the first episode and
Zach,
to
I
me,
never got a chance
something
to.
like that.
I never got. Go
Well,
ahead.
something like that to me is intimidating because I saw it took you like 3 or 4 or 5 years to review the series. So it's like, oh my God,
3 years. Well, roughly.
That's a long time. That's a big commitment,
But here's the thing: if it's something that you love, it's worth the time.
I'm intrigued. I'll put it to you that way. I'm intrigued.
Zach, this is something I meant to do for you, and I've been kind of busy. I didn't get a chance to, and I don't care about saying this live. There is an order that you should watch Babylon 5 in, and I will sit down and I will type it out for you, because there's the series itself, and then there's the TV movies, and then there's the follow-up series, Crusade.
You know what? When you say that, I think for me, I should start with the films, to be honest with you. That was my key. That was my key into Star Trek, was the movies.
The only thing is you're going to miss a lot of context because the movies are built off of the show itself. That's why that's why I'm going to sit down and write you out a watch order, because you watch the series and then you interject the movies at particular points in the series,
You don't think
and
I
it
can do
kind
the
of
films first?
you could, but like I said, there's going to be context that you're going to miss and everything by not watching the series alongside the movies, because the movies are essentially just longer episodes. Really, the movies are like a typical episode is like 40 minutes. The TV movies are roughly maybe an hour and a half plus, and everything. But you're going to miss a lot of context by watching the movies independent of watching the show. Go ahead. Yeah, you're fine. So that's my recommendation to you for Babylon 5.
Okay, well, I had kind of a interesting bookend to this podcast. If you check the private chat, let me know if you want to roll with it, and I'll get you the timestamp.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, give me a couple seconds here.
You're fine. Go ahead. I can fill the time till you're ready. Well, as I mentioned, we just recently wrapped up. It was a couple weeks ago. We wrapped up our review of Babylon 5 and Crusade, and me and the group and everything, we've been discussing, and this is something we're going to be doing. I think we're going to start next year potentially. We're actually going to jump into the Orville, because that's a show that a more recent show that a lot of people have given a lot of positive feedback to, and they say it's almost an homage to Star Trek, but it's its own thing at the same time. And I won't lie, as you have said, spending almost 3 years or anything right around 3 years reviewing one show is kind of intimidating, but it kind of goes back to what I said. When it's something that you love, the passage of time means very little. And to me, Babylon 5 was a labor of love, and the Orville will also be a labor of love. So, I think I'm looking forward to experiencing it for the first time, because I've never watched a single episode myself, but I've heard consistently nothing but good things from season 1 all the way through season 3, and I'm really hoping that the Orville does get a season 4, and potentially even as many seasons as Seth MacFarlane and Disney/Hulu are willing to put to finance. I think that's one thing a lot of people are looking for nowadays, is they're looking for good entertainment. And I've watched several videos of some shows that have been less than exceptional, and one of those in particular is The Rings of Power. I will not give it the dignity of associating it with. I will not give it the dignity to associate with J.R.R. Tolkien's masterwork, that being The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The
Okay,
Silmarillion.
so
It
I
is just
saw
The
the
Rings of
first
Power.
episode.
Okay.
Okay, and I said to myself,
Mm-hmm.
"What the?
Mm-hmm.
I can't focus. They're driving me insane. They're like showing me like 1,000 locations, 500 characters in the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
They violated the basic rules of fiction. You've
Mm-hmm.
got to stick with the main character for the first 2 or 3 episodes. So it's like, what the fuck are we doing? Looks great, but is totally confusing."
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got the clip up. I'm having to get through the ad, so just give me a second.
Okay. Once we're ready, let me do a little introduction.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna bring it up. You get me taken down again, I'm gonna be really cheesed. kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, usually it's worth it.
Yeah, it is.
House of Usher short
I
film.
cannot
That
tell a
was
lot.
pretty fucking cool.
I am not a cook. Oh, that was pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, it was. Yes. Okay, you said the timestamp is 9:45.
Yep. So this is Colbert
Is that
asking
right?
George. Yep.
Okay.
So this is Colbert asking George R.R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones, about the state of science fiction today.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of plays into our whole conversation here. So this
Oh,
is going to be an interesting little end here for us, I think.
this should be this. Yeah, this goes with this. We're gonna wrap up. So, okay, this should be interesting.
TV series too. They did a really good job adapting it.
There's a recent piece in the Washington Post pointed out that in the current fantasy and science fiction adaptations that we see on TV, it focuses on downfall and decline. And why do you think that is? And because the science fiction certainly that I grew up with, sort of the golden age and even silver age science fiction, was all sort of out of the Enlightenment, about the idea of the perfectibility of mankind or the expandability of humankind.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of dystopia, or there has been for about 30 years now, a lot of dystopia and decline. A, why do you think that is? And B, are you an optimist and a pessimist in your work?
Well, I mean, it's a serious subject, but lately I'm becoming more and more pessimistic. Yeah, I grew up on golden age science fiction, and then the science fiction of the 60s and 70s. There was every writer had his own background, his own world building, or in many cases, many world building. I called my future history the Thousand Worlds. And Asimov had the foundation. Robert A. Heinlein had future history. Larry Niven had known space.
Yeah.
But they all had a kind of similar template to it, a consensus future history, which was that mankind would, number one, we would get together and form some sort of global government and put an end to war. Sometimes it was after a nuclear holocaust, but then eventually we'd learn a lesson. And then we would go to the solar system first. We would go to the moon. We would make colonies on Mars. Then somehow we would perfect a way to get to the stars. And how? Because we knew, we were science writers. We knew about Einstein, theory of relativity. Can't just step on the accelerator. So we invented, hyperspace, warp drive, black holes, that's how we'll get there. Well, we'll get to the stars, we'll form the galactic empire, we'll have colonies. The human race will go on forever. We will go to the stars, our culture, our history. Obviously, these were novels, so there was conflict, there were wars, there were really weird-ass societies where they had strange customs, but there was a fundamental optimism to it. And I certainly shared that. I think I look back on it, it was almost religious faith. I mean, I remember I was 21 years old when we landed on the moon. And they had science fiction writers commentating on that next to Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley and all that.
Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, and I think it was Heinlein who said we should, stop with before Christ and Anno Domino, and this is the year one of the human race and the new space age. This is the most important event in the history of mankind, that we have gone to the moon. And I believe that. I believe that. And even before that happened, reading books.
I just want to pause here for a second.
Yeah.
A lot of what he is saying, I agree with. I don't know how I feel about the one world government. Sounds a little too much like a new world order, but
Well, I don't think he's necessarily saying that. I mean, the comparison I draw from this is the sense of optimism in sci-fi is dead. It's like you look at the Next Generation, and that was a beautifully optimistic story where people had set aside their differences, and you were really looking at an evolved version of the human being. And you don't really see that anymore. Like he's talking about, I'm a fan of dystopia, but I
Mhm.
get where he's coming from. I mean, there's something to say about the change in um, what the people are producing nowadays and what people were producing back in the day. Like the original Star Wars was a inherently optimistic story. So was Star Trek,
Yeah.
and we're
Well,
seeing that
yeah.
kind of flip.
Well, if you look at a lot of the science fiction that came out before Star Wars, it was dystopian, it was apocalyptic, it was very downbeat, it was very
Well, not
depressing.
really. I disagree. I would say in terms of let's talk about mainstream sci-fi. I think
Hmm.
for a long time was inherently positive in a lot of ways. It's like Star Wars is one of the most positive stories ever.
Yeah, no, I'd
Like
agree.
talk about mainstream zeitgeist. I mean, here's a guy who redeemed his father, a monster. That was the story of the original trilogy.
Hmm.
There was something poetic and beautiful. Star Trek, on the other hand, showed that humans could ascend, our petty grievances.
Yeah, and that's very true, and that's kind of the same. JMS J Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, who wrote practically every single episode, including the movies, and worked on the scripts and everything for Crusade as well. He was almost like an heir to Roddenberry and Clark, and I know I've never read any of Isaac Asimov's books, but I have heard of them, and a lot of them had the same optimistic outlook for the future of humanity. And that's when you get around to watching the rest of the series and the movies, Zach, that's what I think you'll see in Babylon 5 as well. And Clark, or not Clark, but Martin, he does make a very good point. I mean, he grew up in an era long before either one of us were alive. I mean, he grew up probably watching the old black and white serials at the local movie theater or whatever,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Buck Rogers and Captain
He's of
Cody and stuff like that. Yeah,
the generation of George Lucas.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he
Yep.
is. And you know what? He's right, because everything, and you brought it up yourself. Everything, it seems like, is just very downbeat and depressing, and there's no hope in science fiction. But there's this one outlier, and I mentioned it and everything while you were looking up the clip, and that was the Orville, which does, from what I understand, have a more upbeat and optimistic and at times very humorous outlook on the future for humanity.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
Well,
think that's why it has resonated so strongly with its fan base and with the general public.
it's a
And I
clone
think,
of Next Gen. Is Seth
uh,
MacFarlane had tried to acquire the rights to do his own version and was denied, so he
mhm,
did his own.
yeah. So let's finish this interview. There's about 3 minutes left, so I'd like to
In
hear
the
the rest of
50s,
this.
I had the faith that we would go to the moon and we would go to Mars and we would eventually, maybe it'd take 500 years, but we would get to the stars. Um, what I never saw coming is that we would go to the moon and then we would stop going to the moon. And we would, oh, moon, boy, it's just rocks. We'll stay at home, and we wouldn't go to Mars at all, and we would sort of abandon the space program. And now I look at the world we're living in. I'm sorry, this is worse than Westeros here, but there were a lot of works back in the 50s too that were dystopias, and frequently they were after nuclear war. We were very worried about nuclear war
Mhm.
in the 50s and 60s, and then we sort of stopped worrying about it, and we started worrying about the zombie apocalypse instead. But suddenly, nuclear war seems more and more feasible again. It's back there. We may have a nuclear war, and we have new pandemic diseases that are wiping us out. There were a lot of science fiction books about that too. But even in some of those old books, there was a nuclear war, and you have mutants roaming the landscape and horrible things. There would always be some good people who would get through civilization. Optimism was still there, even if the setting was terrible.
Yeah.
Is it still there? I mean, can we be optimistic about climate change? Can we be optimistic about
Mm.
what are we going to do if Putin actually does use nuclear bombs? What do we want to do? I wish I had a dragon I could fight it. I don't.
Well, you said just a moment ago, you said that this was in a way like science fiction, in some way your faith, not a religious
Yeah.
faith, but a faith in that vision of the future. Are you having a crisis of faith?
I think I am. Yeah, I don't know. You know, I
Wow.
do still think maybe it won't be Americans, or maybe it'll be 300 years from now after our nuclear war or any exchange. But I do think we will eventually go to the moon, and we will go to Mars, and we will go to some of the moons of Jupiter. The stars are looking harder and harder. The distances are so great. I don't believe in warp drives. I don't believe in hyperspace.
What about the Starshot mission, which is very small
That's about it.
probes on
That's about it.
celestials, booted by space-based lasers to go to Proxima Centauri, which
Okay.
is
So I thought that might be interesting in relation to Andor and the conversation in general. I mean,
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
to me that's kind of a watershed moment. I mean, George R.R. Martin, one of the great writers of all time, one of the guys, he's obviously still alive, talking about a crisis within sci-fi and the shift.
Well, you know what? He's not inherently wrong, because if you look at a lot of the stuff that's being written more mainline, it is rather depressing. Now, there are independent indie writers out there who are working on their own stuff, and it's a lot more optimistic. And I was a um, I regard him as a friend. We haven't talked in a while and everything, but he's written a series of books that depicts a very far distant future, and a future for humanity, that we have gone to the stars, and we have encountered alien life, and we have evolved and grown beyond what we are now, and even further beyond what we would be in the future. And he's writing what he wants and what I think he hopes humanity may one day become. And he's one of those independent authors, one of those independent creators that's created his own universe, created his own characters and his own legendarium, and it's really something to behold. I'm doing it on a smaller scale with my own stuff and everything. It's more fan fiction than it is original ideas and everything, but it's in a universe that I love. And I think, as Martin just said in that interview with Colbert, people are looking for sources of hope. And I think a show like Andor gives us a picture of that hope, even when
It's a
things
mix.
are.
Andor
Yeah.
is a mix of the two.
Yeah. It does show things when they're it seems very bleak, but at the same time, it shows an image of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people are looking for. And that's what people, I think, want right now. And I can't say I necessarily blame them. I'm one of those people. I want stories that are more hopeful. I mean, yeah, I don't want everything to be sunshine and rainbows and light pop. I do want conflict. I do want there to be stakes. I do want compelling and interesting antagonists and villains and so on. But I want there to be a message of hope.
Yeah, well,
And
I think in some ways sci-fi has reflected the times. I mean, in the
Mhm.
60s, you had a very optimistic outlook. Today, I mean, we're looking at a much different picture.
That's true. We are. But, to put a final point on this, Andor is a story about revolution. It is a story about a hero's journey. It is a very unlikely hero, and that is, of course, Cassian Andor. And for season 1, I applaud the cast, the crew, the directors, the writers, the everyone, the person that put the dirt down on the set and everything of the streets of Ferrix, because they have given us something truly exceptional. I can't wait to see what season 2 of Andor brings us. And I am, as always, I am hopeful. I am the unabashed optimist until you show me that you've given me reason to lose that optimism. But before we close out, I do want to thank Zach. Great conversation, great stream, bud. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. It's always a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I did. And to everybody that catches this on the replay, I hope you all enjoyed the discussion tonight. And of course, leave your comments down below with anything me and Zach brought up or anything we might have missed. I do want to let you know December is coming up, and of course, it is one of my favorite times of year. It is the Christmas season, and I do have a series of reviews going to be coming up and everything. Some favorite films from my childhood and my from the more modern era of cinema. We're going to be talking about The Grinch. We're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite movies from the 80s.
The Karloff one?
I did that one a couple of years ago.
Oh, did you? Okay.
The one with Jim Carrey, actually.
Oh, okay.
Going to be doing a retro review of one of my favorite films from the 80s and everything. Of course, that is Joe Dante's and Steven Spielberg's Gremlins. I'm going to be doing also a review of also another favorite film of mine from the 1980s, and that is, of course, A Christmas Story. And me and Madam Ambassador are going to be doing a double feature review for a pair of classics from the ultra retro era, and that was, of course, going to be Holiday Inn and White Christmas. So, like I said, this is my favorite time of year. I love the Christmas season. As I said once long ago, the ambassador loved Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Go ask him why. He will tell you the reason. It was because his head was screwed on just right. It was because his shoes weren't too tight. And his heart was filled with Christmas cheer. So, anyways, folks, you all have a great night. We will see you all later. Stay ambassadorial.
Take care, people.
These are the ambassadors. Signing off.